Hey guys, it's Brittany Hartley here with No Nonsense Spirituality, and I do a lot of content on nihilism. Usually, I try to come in with data and things that are helpful for people who are existential crisis. I try to do a video that's broad enough to be of interest to lots of people who are finding themselves in the meaning crisis. I try to bring receipts for everything that I claim, but today we're going to be doing something a little bit more niche and where I'm going to have to make some jumps off of the data. And that is, what does love look like when you're nihilistic? If you know, for example, that you are a bag of atoms and that the self is an illusion and this is all evolution pulling the strings, how does that show up in love and relationships? And is love possible if you truly feel like you see outside the matrix? So we're going to start with some data, the data that we have, and then we're going to see where we end up, because the data is going to end and we're going to have to use some anecdotal evidence or even just my own intuitions about what love means for nihilists. So, first of all, when I say nihilism, I just mean the philosophy that says there's no inherent meaning in the universe. There's lots of different kinds of nihilism. There's epistemological nihilism, there's various forms of philosophical nihilism. But if you want to talk about ultimate nihilism, it's where in every aspect of life, you're just ultra aware of how and why you're doing what you're doing. And you're not really in the experience of it per se. You're just more in the hyper rationality of saying, I'm doing this because of this reason. And you're just aware that you are a bag of atoms in a cause and effect kind of universe. So, first, what we do know about nihilism is that the higher your nihilism scores, or the belief that there's no inherent meaning in the universe, the greater you're going to be linked to depression and low life satisfaction, even when controlling for people who are creating meaning in life. So there are some nihilists who are perfectly happy being nihilist. They will create meaning in life. It does tend to be harder than when you have a community, like a religious community, where you have shared meaning of life with your family and your friends and your community. So even if you are one of the kinds of nihilists that creates meaning, you still tend to, according to the data, struggle a little bit more with things like depression and life satisfaction, just because you feel like you see more suffering. You are aware that you're going to die. You're aware that a lot of life is just, if you're lucky or unlucky. And that kind of awareness, that kind of seeing, does tend towards higher levels of depression. And we also know that the more you know, like the more you read philosophy, the more you see suffering, the more you see that this is all kind of some strange game and we don't understand that we're here, why we're here, and you're going to die. The more you really embrace that and accept that, the greater chances of depression you're likely to have. So from a scientific standpoint, we have a lot of evidence that shows that ignorance is bliss. And there's a reason that evolution rewarded religion. Believing a story, even if it's not true, if it helps you not have to face death, and you really believe that everything's going to be okay, and you believe that you're special, and you believe that the universe was made just for you, and you have a community of people who believe the same things and show up for each other, and you get all the benefits of community, that tends to have, in the statistics, a higher quality of life than those who know that, I'm just a talking ape on a spinning planet and then I'm going to die. Even when you do your best to try to create meaning, it tends to be harder because you have to be aware of more suffering, and you don't get the magical story. Like when we heard about the kids that died in the camp, the religious people can take that breath and say those girls are with Jesus now. If you don't have that, you just have to sit with how sad that is, and that can take a toll on your mental health. So now, past this, we don't have a lot of data specifically on nihilism in relationships. What we do have data on is neuroticism. And there is an overlap between nihilists and those who are neurotic. And if you're an optimistic nihilist, meaning there's no inherent meaning in the universe, you're going to die, but you're just like having the best time of your life, and you're like, you don't suffer a lot, life is great, then you probably are low in neuroticism and high in extroversion, and you tend to do okay okay with nihilism. But there is an overlap between nihilists and those who are neurotic. Now, neuroticism is when your brain has a tendency to focus on the negative. And those who are neurotic also tend towards nihilism because you don't see the world as beautiful with God painting sunsets with his watercolors. You see the suffering, you see the struggle to find meaning, and you see like the level of bullshit that is essentially being alive. And so often for nihilists, the neuroticism affects your philosophy and makes you more nihilistic, and then the nihilism kind of reinforces your neuroticism, and that is the downward spiral of nihilism. And so for neuroticism, we know that if you are high in neuroticism, where your brain tends to spiral about negative things, you're going to have lower relationship satisfaction for both partners. Like you are going to suffer, and whoever you're partner with is also probably going to suffer too. And the dangerous one is what I am, which is high neuroticism and introversion, because now you have a tendency to also be more isolated. And this is where brains suffer the most, just genetically. Like genetically, you're not going to naturally be a happy person if you're neurotic and introverted. You're going to have to work on it more and learn essentially the skills of how to be more optimistic in your nihilism, or to be more existentialist or absurdist, or any of these other tools that can help with the neuroticism and the isolation. And this is where I want to bring in Alex O'Connor, because he did an experience lately where he said, I'm going to live like a nihilist, because so many people told him you can't really live like a nihilist. So then he asked the question, what would it like to truly live each moment with like across the board, all the different kinds of nihilism, a truly nihilistic worldview, where you are just super aware of the psychological, sociological, evolutionary reasons why you would do something. So a true nihilist experiencing a first kiss would say, yes, this is dopamine. Evolution is rewarding me for this kiss because it wants me to procreate. We're kissing with our tongues now. This is our gut biomes checking each other out. I'm attracted to this person because they're showing signs of fertility as perceived by certain cultural markers. And you're not really in the experience of it or any meaning that comes from it. You're just super aware of why you're doing what you're doing from like almost like a clinical point of view. And so Alex O'Connor tried living like this for a while, and he stopped after, I think it wasn't very long. It was either a few days or like a week, because he ultimately found it boring. And so he stopped because life just became so boring to think of it this way. It's like choosing to read a scientific paper on the concept of love rather than having the experience of feeling loved and being loved by someone, or feeling love towards someone and feeling that love in return. And so the experience is almost more interesting, especially in our bodies, than just reading about it from this hyper rational point of view. And so only a small group of people can maintain the level of nihilism that I'm talking about, where you're just ultra aware, even in a first kiss, of what is ultimately going on at root level. So the groups that can maintain that level of nihilism, you got to start with people who are neurodivergent, especially if if you're on the autism spectrum. If you're on the autism spectrum and you have that high analytical systematizing traits, you may naturally experience life through that hyper rational lens, which is why so many of the things that we do socially are so absurd from that lens. And so they can sometimes totally detach from these kind of social emotional scripts or experiences and perceive events like a first kiss through kind of logic and this kind of detached observation. Temple Grandin famously said that she doesn't experience emotions in the typical way, and she compares her thinking to Google images rather than like feelings that she can describe in her body. Another group is people who struggle to feel. And I would say that I'm not on the autism spectrum, but I definitely had, with postpartum depression, I had anhedonia. And anhedonia is a certain kind of depressive subtype. It shows up with different kinds of depression. And it can sometimes lead people into this hyper rational interpretation of life because you no longer feel anything. Anhedonia is when you've been depressed so long and so severely that you now don't feel anything at all. And so the emotional feeling of a kiss doesn't land. And so the brain just defaults to an analysis. This is just genetic impulses. This is just evolution wanting us to procreate. This is just a stupid game, that kind of thinking. And so these individuals don't intellectualize because they want to feel smart. They do it because they're trying to make sense of, their brain is trying to make sense of what's happening when they don't feel anything. And if you've been depressed for so long that you no longer feel, you start interacting with the world not from feelings and experience, but from kind of this rational, skeptical, negative thoughts. And if that's your reality, then you have anhedonia. And one of the best things for that is psychedelic use to kind of reset your nervous system on that. But as I have other videos on that, as always, use a guide. As always, there's lots of caveats and warnings for that, but that tends to be for anhedonia, that tends to be one of the best tools. Another group that can struggle with like true intense nihilism is highly rational thinkers, highly materialist philosophers who kind of embrace that cold scientific reductionist worldview. And they sometimes just genuinely enjoy reducing human behavior to algorithms and incentive structures and evolutionary drives. And it's not because they feel nothing, but it's because they find truth and even control in that framing. So sometimes that's a safety coping mechanism. It was certainly that way for me. Like rationality felt safe because I had an emotionally volatile parent. But sometimes that's just how someone is wired. They just find that to be the most true, realistic way to look at the world. And then certain trauma survivors, so people who dissociate as like long-term survival strategy, may become overly cognitive about their feelings. And so if a kiss once meant danger or confusion, then breaking it down into like a chemical function becomes like your shield, because then you don't have to, because it's like, oh, I'm not being kissed because I'm lovable, I'm being kissed because of hormones and conditioning. It's like it becomes a shield in some way because of trauma. So most people, though, the majority of people don't live in that hyper rational state all the time. And if you do, it comes with psychological costs. So it either collapses inward into loneliness, complete dissociation, which is what I had, nihilistic despair, and that's when we start to see unaliving thoughts, things like that. And then sometimes there's like a break where you feel your body again. Psychedelics or love or grief, there's some kind of transformative experience that breaks just that pattern of thinking so that you can feel awe or embodiment again. And then some compartmentalize, so they have that intellectualizing part of their brain, but they can be emotionally immersed in other parts of their life. And so what does this look like if you tend towards, or you're somewhere on the spectrum of nihilism or neuroticism? If you're someone like me who tends towards rationality, tends towards depression, tends towards neuroticism, can't seem sometimes to join society in the silly little games, the question is love available for us? And what does that look like when that's your natural brain state, whether that be because of philosophy or trauma or neurodiversity, or often some combination? If this is kind of how you experience the world, the question then is, what does love look like? Especially when love, like, if you're fully aware that the self is an illusion and that love is a neurochemical feedback loop built for evolutionary success, can you still love and be loved when we kind of at some level know that it's part of an evolutionary game? So let's look at partnerships now. Statistically, the best pairing is if you're not neurotic and you're not nihilistic and you have emotional well-being and you find someone that you build shared meaning with. Like, sorry, like the data says that is going to be the easiest relationship when no one is neurotic and no one is nihilistic. If you are not neurotic, but you are philosophically nihilistic, you will have emotional stability because you're not neurotic. You don't spiral. That's great. But you will probably experience philosophical disconnection in your relationship. There'll be some level of loneliness because a nihilist is more likely to feel existentially lonely anyways. And then if you are neurotic and not nihilistic, so you have negative spirals, but you feel like you have meaning and purpose, then you can build that with a partner because you're not nihilistic, and that can help to keep your spirals at bay. Now, the worst is if you're neurotic and nihilistic, because then it makes it hard for someone to connect emotionally enough to you to make a kind of long-term stable relationship container where you both can grow. So what tends to happen, and now I'm fully in anecdotal evidence from talking to so many nihilistic people or people in existential crisis, and I'm now operating without data, just on my own intuitions, and I could be wrong, is what I do find is that people who tend towards nihilism, especially if there's some neuroticism in there where they struggle with depression or hyper rationalization, they tend to not be attracted to other nihilists. And, there's something there where our subconscious often knows better than to pick a partner that spirals us. Like evolution wants, if it's wanting children, it wants essentially mom and dad to have different traits to help with that child's survival. And so often we're attracted to something that we're missing. And so neurotic people tend to not choose neurotic partners. So if you are super, super dark and nihilistic and you're spiraling all the time and what is the meaning of life kind of stuff, you don't tend to pick a partner who's exactly like that. It just doesn't happen. So my theory is that nihilists tend to find partners who help them enjoy life a little bit more. Maybe they're not quite as philosophical as they are. Maybe they experience life a little bit more because that's what the nihilist needs. They need help with that. And so now, why would anyone choose a nihilist, right? That's a question that I get when I'm talking about this on TikTok. Why would anyone choose to be with a nihilist? Well, a healthy nihilist, an optimistic nihilist, a very grounded nihilist is fantastic, because that is a fantastic partner for someone who needs a little bit more chaos, because they need someone to help them break open or to challenge ideas or not take themselves too seriously. A nihilist who either has the personality type where they enjoy life or they've done the work to become more that way are attractive to personality types that sometimes need help to break them open from time to time. Maybe they like how the nihilist can do silly things without caring what people think, because sometimes they care too much, or sometimes they get too ordered or too influenced by, silly societal things. So what will happen, what I see a lot, is where the one who is more grounded and enjoys life more, experiences life more, helps the nihilist enjoy life. And the nihilist helps the other person not care so much about things that don't matter. And there can be a container where that partnership can be mutually beneficial and they will attract each other. Now, the problem is that both will feel alone in this relationship from time to time, even if the relationship is healthy, even if both people are growing, because the person who gets lost in the experience will sometimes want someone who's as lost into the dance as they are. And the nihilist will sometimes feel like their partner doesn't understand or doesn't see the world the way they do. When I did this bit on TikTok, I had a lot of comments that said things like, I love my partner. It's a good relationship. I'm planning our anniversary, which matters a lot to my partner, but it's just a silly little ritual to me. And, I wouldn't do it if it didn't matter to my partner, kind of stuff. And there was a lot of comments like that. And when they break up, what it tends to be is the philosophical, highly rational, nihilistic male. It's more, more tendency to be male there. And the female partner doing the breaking up because of the disconnect and emotional connection. And so in my relationship, that's not accurate because I'm the neurotic nihilist in my relationship and I'm the woman. But we do know that the statistics for women doing the breakups and divorcing is higher than men divorcing. And that would be the same for this subset too, because men are more likely to stay in relationships despite dissatisfaction. And if they're neurotic, they're more likely to rely on that relationship for emotional support, because by themselves, they don't do very well, or they're, emotionally up and down. And so even if they're not happy in the relationship or they don't feel understood in the relationship, they're more likely to stay. And so a nihilist is more likely to get broken up with because, like, I'm in this dance and you are not here. Like, you're not emotionally with me. And we know from emotional intelligence mismatch studies in romantic relationships that it does matter, even if both partners love each other. If one person is intellectualizing and the other person is very emotionally immersed, they often miss each other's signals, which leads to emotional loneliness, even in stable couples, for both people. And these two people, even when the relationship is working and not volatile, they'll both feel lonely from time to time. It's like one person is watching a movie and the other person is reading IMDb trivia out loud, and they're just missing each other. And so the person who is nihilistic tends to not fully tell their partner how much they are playing the game of love, because they don't feel like, because their partner is going to be hurt by that. And so sometimes they just don't feel in love as much as they're doing the action of love. And the emotional partner, the one who's a little bit more grounded, can be hurt by this. And so sometimes the nihilistic partner doesn't tell their partner everything, if that makes sense. So, the best way then to access love, if you're the nihilistic partner, is you have to learn how to give yourself into experience and create a shared experience, even while intellectually knowing that you're creating it. And that's your own personal work to do. If you're depressed and negative and skeptical and cynical about everything, you're not great company. Like you probably shouldn't be in a relationship if you can't be in a room by yourself. But that's not all of who you are. That may be the chapter of where you are in right now, but you are a lot more than your cynicism. So you've got to turn your body back on. You've got to connect to things like play again. You have to learn how to play in your own unique way. What I'm doing right now is a form of play for me. That's different than other people. I'm playing with words and I'm putting it out there and seeing what comes back and what comments you write back. But it's a form of play for me, right? You have to learn how to play in your own unique way. So part of that work is just individual. You need to be in a good place. You need to be on top of your depression. You need to have some emotional resilience and learn how to notice your negative thoughts rather than jumping down into the spiral of your negative thoughts. And you have to learn how to step into experience even while knowing, like even while rationally knowing that you're stepping into the experience. And you have to essentially be able to get big enough where you can experience both the experience and like be in your body for the experience while also having that rational part of you that is trying to understand the experience. And you have to have kind of both online at the same time, and you have to work on that. And the second part for what you can do to maintain a loving relationship as a nihilist is you have to essentially choose to play the game of love, where you know your partner is a bag of atoms. You know that they're not your soulmate. You know that you probably could have been happy with thousands of other people, and you meeting this person was random. But you create meaning and you create love by saying, I'm going to choose to do life with this person. I'm going to choose to expand by challenging myself to see the world the way that they do. I'm going to commit to growing. I'm going to commit to witnessing their life. I'm going to commit to choosing to act with kindness even when I want to be selfish, to choose to buy flowers even though I know it's a silly ritual because it's going to make my partner smile. And you essentially choose, I'm going to play this game with you where we learn how to do this thing called love, where we learn how to be there for each other. Even though we're two humans who will never see the world the same way, but we happen to be spinning on the same planet and we seem to kind of enjoy one another's company. And I'm a meat suit and I want to do life with you, this other meat suit that sees the world in a whole different way. And you essentially consent to throwing yourself into that process, even while knowing at some level that it's another game to be played, but it's a game worth playing, I think. And then the last thing that the data does show is that if you're in a relationship where one or both partners is not, philosophically nihilistic, if you have a shared sense of purpose, that goes a long way. So in the study of Journal of Marriage and Family, it showed that couples who shared long-term goals report, 30% higher satisfaction, whether it's planning adventures or raising a pet or building a business together or deciding to have a family. Shared purpose acts as like a relational glue. And it's if one person person, though, is fundamentalist in a relationship with a nihilist, that relationship will either end very quickly, or it's going to be so lonely and disconnected that it's over, even if they are, still officially together. But if the partner isn't fully fundamentalist, and if they can commit to some kind of shared meaning, even if one is more, nihilistic than the other, like, some shared, we like to travel together, and having a travel companion to see the world is just great, or we love the journey of being parents together and being a family, or we love our work and the journey of being entrepreneurs just for the ride of it. If there's some sense of shared meaning, even if it's intentionally created, and the nihilistic partner is doing their part to stay on top of depression and neuroticism, and they're open to experience, then not only can it work, but it also can be a very stable relationship in that way. It's almost romantic in a whole different way. There's an honesty in it that can be more stable than romantic relationships, because when you believe that that person is your soulmate, then it's this big, ugly breakup. And the stability comes in when you say to your partner, if they can handle it, you're not my twin flame, but of all the people spinning on this planet, I really like you. Like, whatever you've got over there with your meat suit, and you're interesting to me, and I enjoy being around you. Will you do this life with me? Life is mysterious, and it's going to be strange, and it's going to be hard, and we're going to watch our parents die, and things will happen, and you're going to see me at my worst. You're going to see me with diarrhea and throwing up and doing embarrassing things, but I'd rather do life with you than alone. And I'm going to choose to consent to play this ultimate game, the game of loving someone in such a way that I'm able to experience the world not just through my eyes, but your eyes too. And I'll witness your life, and you'll witness mine. And it's not romantic, perhaps, but it's honest. And when people consent to that kind of relationship, it can lead to very long lasting relationships, even though both people or one person may truly believe that they're going to die, and the self is an illusion and all those other things. They may be totally rationally aware of all of that. So a relationship based on awareness, not kind of naive sentimentality or like Hallmark, can actually be more stable, because it's rooted in consent and intentionality rather than illusion. So if you can make it a voluntary game, it's two humans consenting to give meaning to each other's lives. And maybe that's not magic, but it can still feel real, and it can also, in this world, still be very valuable. So yes, nihilistic love is realizable, but only if you can actively bridge that gap with practicing emotional attunement, and practicing, experience and shared experience, working on some kind of shared purpose, and framing love as a deliberate act. And so that means like working on your emotional regulation skills so that you're not using your partner to ground your neuroticism, which isn't fair to them. Crafting shared rituals or goals that speak to both of you, and then just kind of owning the illusion that we are choosing to co-create love, even though it may be totally random that we bumped into each other. So the data shows that it's not only possible, but that kind of relationship can be very fulfilling. It's not cosmic, it's not grandiose, but it is deliberate and honest and personal. And in a world of a lot of illusions and ups and downs and that kind of thing, maybe that's enough. Now, for you nosy ones, which I'm sure there are, sometimes my relationship in my own marriage has worked in the sense of collective shared purpose. Sometimes we were in a mixed faith marriage where he believed and I didn't. Sometimes it was collapsing. Sometimes we were both alone. It's something I'm still figuring out, and we're still figuring out. It's very messy. We've both changed many times. But in a world of entropy and deconstruction, I do think that there's value when it's not toxic and abusive. Of course, I'm not advocating for anyone to stay in bad relationships. Religions do that, not me. But I do want to say, especially because it's so rare to talk about in the deconstruction space, because a lot of times there's a lot of divorce in that space because you just get married so young before you even know who you are, that I do want to say that I think it is valuable to witness someone over many years, over many life changes, integrating into someone's family and you into theirs. I think there's value in someone seeing you at your best and your worst. There's value in someone being there when you're sick. There's value in saying, I'm a messy, imperfect human, and you seem to be too. Do you want to work on it together? And I'll be a mirror for you, and you'll be a mirror for me. So one of my favorite philosophers on love is a modern one, Alain de Botton, and his whole thesis about love, especially in his TED Talk, which is I love, which is called "Why You Will Marry the Wrong Person," is this idea that romantic idealism is part of the problem. So from his view, a nihilist isn't broken because they're seeing through the illusion. They're actually more prepared to do the real work of love than someone who believes in soulmates. And according to Alain de Botton, love is a skill. And so a nihilist can still learn how to experience, how to build this skill set so that they can experience a loving relationship. It's a daily set of these micro decisions to tolerate, to repair, to communicate, to soften, to adapt. And his view is that love begins not when you say, I love you, but when you say, I'm going to do the dishes, even though I'm tired and resentful, because that's the kind of person I want to be in your life. And so in Alain de Botton's eyes, seeing your partner as a flawed bag of atoms with weird habits and emotional immaturities isn't a sign of detachment. It's actual maturity. True love is the willingness to continue loving even after you've seen this person quite clearly. And so he calls this generous interpretation in his books, where it's not expecting your partner to fulfill all your emotional needs, not expecting your partner to see the world exactly the way you do, but to become, more forgiving and even like an amused witness to your partner's complexity, who's living in a completely different universe than you, because they truly see the world differently than you do. And so your partner isn't made to save you or love you the way that you needed to be loved as a child, or to worship you. Messy humans can't be gods for each other. And so he writes that all humans are ultimately untranslatable to each other. No one will fully get you. But the goal isn't to find perfect understanding, but to keep trying with someone, to keep trying to play this game, because it's a worthy game to play. And so the nihilist needs to realize, and this is hard, but the nihilist needs to realize that they shouldn't need their partner to fully see the void, or whatever philosophical thing, way that they see the world. They just need a partner that will continue to keep showing up with their shared goals, and with their, those micro actions of love, to just keep showing up, even though that the other person sees the world differently than you do. And so this idea of compatibility, I mean, there's obviously something to it, like, two nihilists will end a relationship very quickly. But the lady who does the couples therapy show, Dr. Orna, she recently said this on a podcast, where she said she was asked what has she most changed her mind about since starting kind of her work as a therapist, as a couples therapist. And she said she used to really think a lot about compatibility, and now she believes that the success of relationships is much more dependent on your ability to love someone who is different than you. Like really being able to commit to loving someone who is very different than you. And as a nihilist, you're probably not going to find someone who's as nihilistic as you. It may not even be good for you to do so. It may not be good to get someone who can easily spiral you into the void when you're already struggling to stay out of the void the way it is. And so you shouldn't, as the nihilist, want a savior. You shouldn't want someone who understands the void and spirals into it, but also is everything that you're not, because that's not fair to that other person. That makes them into a god. You want them to be everything that you are, and also everything that would save you. And that's when we want our partners to be gods. So you, the nihilist, are not broken for seeing love as, constructed by evolutionary pressures and social harm, hallmark marketing and Valentine's Day and the stupidity of all of that. But now you have to decide, knowing all that, will you choose to play the game of love anyway? Will you build rituals? Will you learn how to stay in the moment? Will you do boring, unsexy, mundane things that build intimacy? Not because you believe in magic, but because you believe in kindness to another fellow meat suit and trying to improve their experience of life on this earth. And they're trying to do the same with you. And in some ways, even though you could have both married other people or been with other people, there's something beautiful about that too. And even if you experience loneliness loneliness, like some level of loneliness in the relationship. That's part of the human experience too, because no one is actually going to ever see the world exactly like you. And for the, nihilists, you can say something like, you may not be the meat suit that was destined to find me because we've been married in previous lives together, but you can say you're my meat suit. And maybe that's not romantic. And maybe that's not great to hear. And so, maybe you have to, with certain partners, you have to be careful in how you say that. But it makes, it's not romantic, but it does make the time pass better to have someone to do life with. So my opinion on love is, if you're in a really rough place with your neuroticism and depression, take a step back from relationships, because statistically it's going to be rough for both of you, and that's not fair for another person to have to save you from that. But if you do your individual work, where you become more emotionally grounded, where you are building meaning and purpose, where you're working on how to bring your body back online, when you're learning how to play better and how to experience, while also keeping that hyper rational part of your brain. If you're doing all of that work, I do think that love is still possible for nihilists, but I do think it looks a little bit different. You're not going to ever get a card from a nihilist that says, it could only have ever been you, and there's just no one on this planet that I ever could have married. And it's like, well, yeah, nihilist has a hard time saying that, because that rational part is like, well, that's not true. If I would have been born somewhere else, then I'd be married to someone else. So it does take out some of like the really romantic stuff, where it's like your twin flames and soulmates. But I will say, there are a lot of games to experience and play while you are alive, and a lot of projects that are worth doing. And I think that the project of love, I think the project of choosing to improve the experience of life for someone else, even when it's hard, and even when it changes you, and even when it's difficult to sometimes see their point of view, I think there's value in that, and I think there's beauty in that. And even though my partner may sometimes not fully understand me, I'm really still glad that this is a game that I choose to play. So I hope that helps you. Yeah. I just, like, I want to be realistic about what love looks like for a nihilist, because there's that skeptical piece that will kind of be annoyed by anything that's in like bullshit land when it comes to love. But I think sometimes we become so skeptical that we miss that there's like a quiet, honest beauty when you just consent to choose another messy human being to do life with, and how that changes you as a person and how it improves your quality of life. So love is just a game, but I think it's a game worth playing. What do you think?